How's it going, guys? What of course you'll be seeing today is a breakdown and review of the exotic pulse rifle in Destiny called Red Death. You can get this weapon a multitude of ways. You can get it through Nightfall Strikes, Legendary Engrams, Vanguard or Crucible rewards, or level ups, the Vaulted Glass or Crota's End raid, or even as of March 13th, as I'm basically doing this review, or the opening week that Destiny came out, you can get it from Xur. So there's lots of ways to get it. Unfortunately, Xur is sort of... well, it is random though, so a lot of times, despite going through all these processes, you're not guaranteed to get it. I personally got mine through beating the Ur-Ute section of the Crota's End raid on normal mode a couple weeks ago, and I've had a blast since. The weapon itself starts with a base damage of 302 and increases to 331 when you're completely finished with the upgrades. You're going to need Glimmer weapon parts and an exotic shard for sure. The other form, whether it be Relic Iron or Spirit Bloom, may be different between you and me. The fire rate is 66%. It has an impact rating of 26, which puts it on the higher damage scale model in terms of pulse rifles, like say for example, Bad Juju in comparison is only 7%. A range of 33, a stability rating of 44, a pretty high reload percentage of 76, and the magazine is 27. So on the preliminary look, of course, it looks like it's a medium to longer range weapon in terms of stats, minus, of course, the perks, which I'll get into, and that is about its key strength, medium to longer range. And of course, the damage model means that each burst hits hard, which is great news because I don't like a lot of those ones that sort of graze the enemy and it needs the full magazine to down them. That's not my type. Red Death is. In terms of PvP damage output, the weapon hits for 23 on body shots and 34 on headshots, so if you hit every single one of the 3 bursts, or the 3 round bursts, so 6 combined rounds to a person's head in the Crucible, then it's a kill. It only requires 2 bursts. With regard to the skill tree, of course, since they're exotics, there's no variation, which means you'll have 3 clear options in terms of ballistics. Accurized ballistics, which increases range and impact but also recoil. Field choke, which does the exact same thing, increases range and impact but also recoil. And aggressive ballistics, which produces predictable and more controllable recoil, but it also reduces range slightly and adds to that controllable recoil. I tend to choose accurized ballistics because it's the stock and I've gotten used to it, and I don't really see the advantage of reducing any of the other stats. I've just gotten used to it. But it's up to you, of course. When breaking down the skill tree, the first perk of note is called Unflinching, and it does exactly as it says. It's much easier to aim this weapon when you're under fire. The next 3 perks, which you'll have a choice over, and each one can be easily justified depending on your playstyle, are Snapshot, which increases aiming speed, which will probably help from mobs, if you choose to use this weapon with mobs. Higher caliber rounds, which causes enemies to stagger a bit when they get hit. And single point sling, which allows you to move faster when aiming and when switching weapons. I tend to prefer higher caliber rounds on average because enemies that are flinching and can't continually push me basically have no chance of getting the kill on me. But again, you could justify any of the above considering the circumstance. Like single point sling might help you if you're trying to solo Crota and you need that health regeneration fast, or if you prefer using this as a medium range weapon and then switching to a shotgun. It's up to you. The last perk of note, of course, is Red Death, which makes the weapon. Each and every kill allows this weapon to bring you back to full health in about 2 seconds, and it also increases reload speed. And I'll break this down further. The next 5 perks are damage upgrades. With regard to my overall impressions in PvE since the Destiny 1.1.1 patch that gave pulse rifles a 9.7 damage buff, Red Death went from being a good pulse rifle to almost top end overnight. It has the damage model of 26 impact, like I said, versus other pulse rifles whose impact's usually about or just below 10, which makes it a hard hitter and the type I personally prefer. The fire rate is slower as a result, of course, but it's still fast enough to deal with mob situations and especially against higher caliber enemies. The Red Death perk is the clear draw to players because obviously it allows you to regenerate health in situations like I mentioned, like the Crota boss fight, where instead of sharing a Chalice of Light, or you won't have one at all in hard mode, you don't have to worry about the Chalice at all, or the lack of it, because you can just regen health by shooting thralls. If you prefer your character build too, with tons of armor or agility instead of recovery, like say you're a striker titan going around beating people up, but you prefer the armor in the close quarters engagements, Red Death at medium range can help you make up for that recovery by bringing your health right back up to charge again. It hits hard, it staggers enemies, it recovers health, and has extremely balanced overall stats. The only downside to this weapon, like most pulse rifles and scout rifles and such, is the fact that close range encounters can be a struggle, or especially if you're going through the abyss in, say, Crota's End and you get mobbed by thralls. No amount of health regeneration at the rate that it does will prevent you from getting mobbed to death. You'd probably want to switch weapons in close range encounters, but if you're playing an aggressive style, single point sling, like I mentioned earlier, might be your perk of choice. In PvP, you're definitely going to want to stay in medium to perhaps longer range encounters, because the weapon's designed for these lengths. Having the unflinching perk will make you a threat in nearly every single gunfight in medium to longer range, and the benefit to it is if it's a close fight or you're facing someone with, say, Thorn, where your health is continually depleting, Red Death will bump you right back up to full for the next encounter. The 1.1.1 patch made this weapon a 2 to 3 round burst kill, of course, depending on if you hit all headshots or not. So on damage alone, neglecting the above amazing perks, a skilled hand with Red Death is truly deadly, pardon the pun. So overall, Destiny's patch in late February made this weapon both amazing in PvE and PvP. It has remarkable utility in nearly every conceivable situation in any mode because of the health regeneration perk alone, and that's ignoring the fact that the recoil is manageable and the hard-hitting bursts. I'd have no qualms about using this weapon as a primary, even the fact that it uses an exotic slot. With the only detriment, of course, being just make sure that you're the perks right, or you have a shotgun handy if you are transitioning to close quarters combat. That's about it. It slaughters just about everything else. Have a good